My last day of corporate work was July 14, 2017. And I came home, I was in the driveway, and I said, I'm home. And my daughter, who would have been 13 at the time, is like, home or home, home? I'm like, I'm home, home.
This is the Hard Thing Podcast. Today, we are overcoming average. Welcome back to the Hard Thing Podcast. Today is another great episode of helping you overcome obstacles, step up above mediocrity, all by doing hard things. Today's our Monday show, so you're going to hear from me, Justin Lewis, and one of my guests who are experts and have actually gone in the field doing hard things, been in the trenches, and lived to tell the tale. I love doing this. I love having these great conversations, and I really hope you do too, because the goal of this podcast is to help you step forward, step up in your life by getting you past those hard things that are in the way. And as a fun byproduct of that, by doing those hard things, you are better able to conquer the next hard things in your life. That's what this podcast is all about. But let's go ahead and jump right in. Let me tell you about today's guest. I talk with Zaprasny. Zaprasny is a certified mental game coaching professional who specializes in working with athletes of all levels from middle school to collegiate levels. Basically, she is a mental coach for athletes. And playing athletics is very mental as it is, and I think you will get a lot out of today's talk because we talk a lot about psyching yourself out and being able to calm down and get into a flow state a little bit. It was a very fun conversation, very insightful. So without further ado, go ahead and listen up to my conversation with Zaprasny. All right, well, thank you for being on the show, Anne. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Let me start off the show by asking the question I love to ask all my guests and even people who aren't my guests. What's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I couldn't break my tiebreaker. So I had a long career in insurance, and at 22 years, I left my original starting company and took a risk and took a senior role with a much smaller company. And 9 months into that role, I got fired. Right. And you think about it, I almost look back and I laughed and you're like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Bam, I got fired. And, I take accountability on that. It was not a good organizational fit. So I move on, and later, 2017, now I'm 31 years in the insurance industry, and I make the decision to walk away from an executive leadership role, a beautiful income, to start my own business. Wow. And, that was hard because, right, you can be attracted to the money, you can be attracted to the comfort, but I knew I was out of alignment. And I wanted to take ownership of my life and take ownership of how I would generate my income going forward.
You said you knew you were out of alignment. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, it was really crazy. It was October 2016. I went to a Brendan Bouchard event called Experts Academy. And that's really about how do you make a living at what you're good at? And he took us through this meditation. So imagine about 1,500 people in a room. And he takes us through this meditation where like 75% of the people started crying. And I loved what I did, but the reality, what I did required me to travel 70% of the time. And, I have 3 kids. I had 2 left at home. And, if there were 3 of me, I could have pulled it off. And so I just got clarity, although no one knew I was not so happy deep down inside. I was missing some formative years of my kids because I traveled Tuesday through Thursday or Monday through Thursday. And my middle child was a sophomore in high school. And I was like, it's going to blink and it's over. So, it was tough because I'm pretty driven and I've been doing it for a long time, but I got clarity. Like, I love to have dinner with my family. Now, we're quarantine and I don't know if I have to have 3 meals for 8 weeks in a row. But, so I just got clarity that I was out of alignment.
That makes sense.
You know,
And that was during your second stint, I guess, in the insurance. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So it was 2016. I had already I already started to actually take steps for a future without insurance. I just didn't know when I would do it, and I didn't know exactly how I would do it. So I had, in 2014, 2015, gone back to school for a second master's, but this one was all for me. It was in sports science with a concentration in sports psych. And I had financially started planning, like to the point where my husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm planning for a future without insurance. And so I didn't just do it impulsively. I was going to pivot. So I went back to get the training I needed, and I financially started planning. And it was October of 16 when I got the aha, at the core, you're out of alignment. So now it's when. And literally, there's this technique we've been taught where you can put a message in your phone. So in your alarm setting, where it says alarm, you put a message. So my message said gratitude, generous, and bold. And those were the 3 attributes that I wanted to kind of be every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the bold was be brave enough to walk away.
Wow.
And summer of 17. So really not that much later, 9 months, 10 months later.
Wow. One thing that sticks out to me is you said you didn't do it just a flight of fancy. It was strategic, and you used the word pivot. And I think I stress that word strategic almost every single podcast, because with a name like the Hard Things Podcast, you get a lot of people telling you, hey man, come do this with me. It's a hard thing. And it's something that it doesn't align with things that are important to me. Like my father-in-law says, hey man, come go on a 20-mile bike ride with me. And to me, that's like, well, that's kind of boring, like, like I'll run, but like biking is not my cup of tea. And I love how you said you were strategic, because I think that is one thing that sets successful people apart, is their ability to be strategic. So I don't know if we can dive deep, and you don't have to give exact numbers, but when you were performing your financial calculations and trying to figure out what a world without your insurance job would look like, can you tell us a little bit more about that experience and what you...
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no comparison. I was a senior exec, right? So I had a very big job. So basically it's purposeful to save money, and purposeful to kind of go, okay, spend within your means, save, and have a strategy that allows you to operate year 1, year 2 with no income.
Well,
or everything that comes in you put forward into the business.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so some people think, well, I'm making X, I'm going to start my business, and on day 1 I'm going to make X, and I want to meet those people, because that's not me, and it's nobody I hang around with, right? However, if you're thinking about an exit, you can use more of your time as you're thinking about that exit and working full time to really develop your strategy. Like, I didn't build my website. I'm like, how could you not have built your website? Like, there are things that strategically you could have done more of, so that when you opened your doors, you were a little bit further ahead.
Yeah.
And I think, if you work in a corporate world, you get a paycheck. Maybe not in Corona world, right?
Yeah.
But no, you get a paycheck every 2 weeks, right? So you have your own business every single day. You have to earn that next revenue opportunity, that next client opportunity.
Well, so you chose more of the strategy, kind of saving up and then cutting off your previous experiences, and well, not necessarily cutting off your experiences, but moving away from that job, stepping into the new role fully. Did you ever consider kind of transitioning slowly from one to the other, or kind of building one up as you were preparing to walk away, or anything like that?
So I had started this, we call the side hustle, like October of 2016. And it wasn't like I built that up significantly to like, oh, now I believe I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a matter of, a combination of circumstances that just said, hey, now's the right time to do it. And what has been interesting is when you have a long-term established career in one vertical and you stop, people might try to invite you back. So probably about 9 months into running my own business, a former boss, invited me back into the industry. And I just said, I'm betting on myself. But, like if you looked at it on paper, you'd be like, you're an idiot. My whole family's like, go, Mom, go. And I just said, no, I want to swing at this and I want to make it happen. And, lots of learnings every day, lots of learnings. I'm sure just as you run a successful podcast and then some not so. You're like, every day you're just learning. It's kind of, it's comical.
Yeah, I have to say so. I agree completely. With a family that is very cognizant of the differences between your job before, your job after, or your business after, I guess, and any opportunities that come up, how did you get them on board with what you're doing?
Yeah. So, we had a journey a little bit. Everybody's fully supportive. I have a lot of energy. And so at home right now, I have a freshman, soon to be a sophomore in high school, and then a senior. And so they're like, Mom, you have way too much energy to be in this house. You need to be out. Right. I had an entire career where life was my Outlook calendar. Right. And it was packed from 7:30 to 5:30. I come home and that first month, I'm trying to start my business and kind of, be a mom. And I pick up my son and I go, my understanding is I'm taking you from point A to point B. He goes, I thought we'd go home and chill for 15 minutes. Right. And I'm like, okay, we had to learn to dance a little bit. And I said, Jay, I'm trying to do some stuff. What's the schedule? And he's like, Ma, no 15-year-old knows what they're doing 5 minutes from now, let alone for the week. Right.
Yeah.
So that whole corporate rigid piece where everything was just so scheduled and boom, 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 to getting a little bit more fluid and, learning to dance because I was around a lot more with the family. But, it's been great.
What lessons have you learned of not only being a business owner, but also being a parent at the same time?
So, really interesting. So my last day of corporate work was July 14, 2017. And I came home, I was in the driveway, and I said, I'm home. And my daughter, who would have been 13 at the time, is like, home or home? I'm like, I'm home. Right. So what have I learned? I'm modeling that, look, at any age, you can do whatever you want. And I'm modeling that it's okay to walk away from, a big job, a big paycheck, if you plan for it.
Yeah.
And I did a really fun, in my estimation, I did a really fun event last night that was a virtual bingo game. It was called Champion Mindset Bingo. So I found an online bingo game where you can make your own cards, and I made all the terms kind of sports psychology, mental performance terms. Mm-hmm. And I had about 40 people join us by Zoom. And my soon-to-be 25-year-old from Madison, Wisconsin was on it. My 18-year-old was on it, my 15-year-old. And then we had a really eclectic group.
Yeah.
And so they got to see me in action, and I had tunes going and stuff. And literally they're like, Mom, that was so fun. Right. So what am I learning? I'm learning that, one, you're never too old to go chase what you want to do. Two, blending it with being a mom and being, a solopreneur is hard work. And literally I'm a workaholic, right? And so when I traveled all the time, it's easy to do big days. So when I was first home, my son's like, yo, you're home, but you're not available. I'm like, okay, right? So 3:00, they get out, they were done with school. I'm like, get out of the office, go downstairs, spend 15 minutes with them. That's why you did this. But I had to really teach myself how to make that behavior change.
Yeah, I I see a very similar thing. I work at home right now, obviously, because of the coronavirus, and I wake up before my wife. She's not working right now. We're living with her parents, and kind of an interesting situation there. But so I wake up early, work out, and I'm working on my podcast, and then seamlessly I just turn off one computer, open up the next computer. I'm working at work, and for the next 8+ hours or so, I'm working. And then after I want to do, and so I have a similar problem of like, how do you know how to balance between the two? And I totally relate with exactly what you're saying of like, okay, I've done enough today, maybe, so I should go spend time with her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's really important. And it's very easy to be a workaholic. It's
Yeah.
very easy. And part of it is like I'll have my mom's voice in my head, and she's like, "You don't spend the money you make. What are you doing?" Right?
Yeah.
And just part of it is we're so like focused on what we want to execute. But my family could probably completely say I could do better at it, but I'm way better today than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm like, I feel like, I spent 3 hours at the family. Can I go back in the office now?
Yes. Yes. And they don't understand that, like, wait, you want to go back to work? Why? They don't understand. I don't get it. So,
Yeah. So I have a couple projects that I'm working on that I'm just trying to get them done, you know?
Yeah.
So it's all good.
If possible, I kind of want to, before we dive into a little bit more about the specifics of your business, I want to turn back the clock a little bit to when you got fired. That is an experience not many people prepare for. So if possible, can you tell us a little bit about why you got fired exactly, what might have been done to prevent that, as well as what you did right after, and how you helped yourself kind of stop the earth shake, you know?
Yeah. So my strength is an attribute about me is I thrive on autonomy and initiative, right? And so for a big part of my career, my boss valued those attributes, right? So if you're my boss, my job is like, what are our goals? Boom, how do we hit them? And I worked for someone who was so comfortable with my offering, my suggestions, my strategic vision. So I switch roles and I go to a new company, and I didn't do my due diligence on really how will we dance together, my new boss and I, right? And this concept of autonomy and initiative and driving the bus without asking permission, not valued. And the company is extremely successful, and his leadership style as a micromanager, as a CEO, worked for him. And there were just things where I'm like, I'm doing X. I don't think I have to ask to do X. And at the end of the day, there wasn't just not a comfort level, and so really the words were, it's not a fit. Mm-hmm. And many of the things that I drove and helped initiate lasted well beyond after I left, and grew and mushroomed, right? Yeah. And so I often say, let's just say you love the orchestra and you love classical music, but you saw me perform once and it was a really cool rock and roll band. And you're like, I like that piece. And you brought that in. Mm-hmm. You're like, no. I want it just to be classical. Right? And so, I think I brought in a great level of expertise. I helped address some challenges that they were having, and they got what they needed. I think I readied the successor, because basically when I left, somebody got elevated into my role. And at the end of the day, it was really just not a fit. Right. And I wasn't completely surprised. It was a Friday. It was June 5th. I don't even remember. 2010? Yeah, June 5th, 2010. And so the day before I was at work, I called my husband. I'm like, I think I'm going to get fired tomorrow. It's like, okay. Right. So literally, like, I talked to him right before. It's like a 9 o'clock meeting. And he's like, just handle it with grace. And I did. Like, literally, they just said it's not a fit. And I stood up and I said, it's been my honor and privilege to work with the company and with the team. I extended my hand. I shook the individual's, hand. And, I'm a big fan of what you role model to your family and to others. So I met with my team. I told them I resigned. I just said, today's my last day. And then when I came home, I, just basically just was transparent, right? So telling your kid you got fired versus you got laid off is different because, they're like looking at you like, Ma, that seems not good.
Yeah.
And I literally the next day I sat down at the computer and I said, if I were going to do it all again, what would I do? And I picked sports psychology. And so that was 2009, right? Somewhere 2009. And I'm like, do I need to go spend 50 grand to motivate people? I'm like, no, I know how to motivate people. So I decided at that time that I would be an independent consultant. And I got picked up as an independent consultant by a company that eventually hired me. But I didn't lose that itch for that sports psychology piece. And I ended up finding a program later. So your question was, what did I do wrong? I think I didn't do my due diligence in terms of selecting the company. When I interviewed, I said, can I interview with some of my peers? And they're like, yeah. It never happened. Right. And so I could have said, great offer, but I really want to interview with some of my peers before we got in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And during the interview, I did ask, I said, you're known as a micromanager and I thrive on autonomy. So how do you think that works? And I probably should have just trusted my gut a little bit. And I could have, when I was in the house, moved my ego a little bit more out of the way and gone, hey, boss, may I, a little bit more than I did.
Sure. I mean,
terrific learning. And literally, so that job gave me a big fancy title. And that big fancy title got me the next big fancy title and expanded responsibilities, etc.
Yeah. We have these, they don't seem like doors, but they really are doors that just open up to bigger and better futures. And it seems like in a way that kind of helped you, I guess indirectly, start moving towards what you do now with sports psychology. And I'm very curious, what made you choose sports psychology and helping athletes?
Yeah, so if I look through my corporate career, my gift was coaching and developing others. I love to coach and develop others. I love to take divisions that are maybe performing at one level and elevating them to a higher level. And I was a college athlete and had the privilege of meeting a gentleman called Dr. Rob Gilbert after my college career. And he works out of Montclair, New Jersey. And he runs a success hotline that he's been running for over 23 years. And when I met him, he had an incredible impact on my life on just the power of positive psychology. So he impacted who I am at work, who I am as a person. And I called him January of 2013 and just said, how did you get into what you're doing? And he just, gave me some insight. And he's like, you could just do it. I'm like, yeah, let's go get some credentials or something behind it. And so today I work with athletes, but I also do business coaching. I still leverage my corporate experience to help, talented, but let's say underappreciated business professionals learn the inside game on how do you raise your visibility? How do you communicate for greater impact so you can get the rewards and recognition? So I have the corporate side, and then I work with athletes. And, my why with the athletes is, I wish I knew then what I know now. If I knew how to shut down that negative chatter, how to really lock down my confidence, all those tools that I teach as an athlete, I had a good career, I would have had a better career.
I am very happy that you brought up a couple of those things because those are actually things I was going to ask about. I'm also fascinated. So you do business coaching, athletic coaching, I guess, not necessarily as a team coach, but you know what I mean. Is there any overlap between the two?
Yeah, there is absolutely overlap. And I just picked up a client who, I was probably competing against some of the big alphabet houses. He basically, when he talked to his boss about working with me, and we worked together a couple of years ago, he said she does the mental side as well. She does that mental performance coaching, and I want that. So yeah, there definitely is, because everything I teach an athlete are the same challenges an entrepreneur has to overcome. It's the same challenges, a business leader has to overcome, which is self-doubt, right? How do I handle stress? How do I perform my best under challenging circumstances? How do I believe I can do it?
Yeah.
So I used to keep them separate. And now when I do some of my workshops and keynote speaking, I am bringing them together, and I talk about a champion mindset before I go into like the corporate discussion of whatever the topic is, because, a growth mindset or a champion mindset is really, today we're going to teach something new. And are you open and willing to kind of step into the game and try something new? Because if I work with a 15, 16-year-old athlete and I said, here's a thing that I want you to try this week, 99% of them will do it. I'm working with a 50-year-old and saying, this is what I want you to do. It's not how I do it. Right? Because we have habits. And so I bring that like growth mindset and that champion mindset challenge into like my public speaking or my workshops now, to challenge my business clients to, step into the game with an open mind.
Yeah. And obviously, when you get new clients, when you speak in front of a group, or when you're contracted by a company to work with an individual or a group, you have to establish trust. So is that one of the ways that you establish trust? And if so, what are some of the other ways that you help them realize how valuable you are?
Yeah, so I think in the business side, I can help establish trust because, I think in the corporate world, there are unspoken rules, right? There are unspoken rules. And I was pretty fortunate to have great mentors to figure out what those rules are. And I love to help people strengthen their brand, strengthen their communication, and strengthen kind of their behavior so that they get greater rewards and recognition. I've had some clients, we worked for a year, helped him get a promotion, and he was like over 7 trying to get a promotion. Right. And I'm like, okay, this is what you got to do. This is what you have to do differently. And to his credit, he did those things to make that happen.
Yeah.
So I think I developed trust by listening, validating, look, you're talented, but these are the things you need to do so that your talent and your contributions get recognized a little bit more.
Have there been any instances where your clients or the prospective athlete has put up some resistance?
So I have been working with athletes since 2016, and probably only one athlete not do the work.
Wow.
And the deal is, I say, your mental skills are just like physical skills, right? You go and you work out, you lift, you train, you invest in your skill development every single day. Right. And so there's a couple skills I want you to work on every day. And if you're not doing them, we're not going to grow those. So, and I can tell you like that, who that person is. Right? Because the flip of it is when the athletes do the work, they learn how to compete more relaxed and with greater confidence. And so if I can compete more relaxed and with greater confidence, the game changes.
Yeah.
And it's for some, it's actually been like incredible. You know, I had one athlete ready to walk away from her sport. And our third session, so 2 hours in, right? So we're into our third session. I'm like, how's it going? She's like, I just had so much fun. We competed this weekend. I had so much fun. I was laughing. I was relaxed. And, you know, I won overall best at the event.
Wow.
You know, and so that doesn't happen to everyone. But, you know, there are some very specific shifts that we teach, right? So one is focus on the process versus the outcome. Right. And that's a simple one that can be true in any arena, sports or life.
Can you explain a little bit more what that means?
Yeah. So let's take a baseball player. So a baseball player can stress themselves out because they're in the batter's box and they're like, I have to get a double. I have to get a double. Right. And they're 19 years old and they have to get a double. Mm-hmm. You know, and if we take this all the way through, he doesn't get a double, then he gets pissed off, he gets angry, erodes his confidence, goes out to the field, and he's distracted because he's annoyed, right? And so if we look at the history of the game, there's no baseball player ever who's gotten a double every time they've been up at bat, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the athlete has like an unrealistic expectation on themselves. They're thinking about the outcome. I want a double. I want a PR, you know, right? And so what we say, what can you control? What can you control? Your effort, right? So in terms of baseball, I can control, you know, can I have a quality at bat? Can I swing at good pitches? Am I making good contact? Whether or not that contact results in, you know, I get on base depends on how well the defense plays. Right? So shifting to focus on the process is what's the process to play your sport well and that you can control. So if we jump over to basketball, I can think I have to score 20 points, or I can say I'm going to be really aggressive. I'm going to box out. I'm going to play great defense. I'm going to be aggressive on offense. I'm going to take it to the basket. I'm going to stay in the play and I'm going to follow my shot. The things I can control versus did the ball go in the hoop? Wow. So you take that over into life. You have a lot of people, they want to lose weight, right? And so, you know, I was good for 3 days. I get on the scale. I didn't lose any weight, right? So we're so focused on the outcome. But can you, for 5 days, move your body for 30 minutes and drink water every single day? And if you don't even get on the scale, can you just focus on the process? You know, did I make healthy or better eating choices today? Did I move my body? Did I drink water? Right? What's the process of success for X? You know, the process to be healthy, the process to drive good sales, the process to play my sport well versus just the outcome.
Wow.
Right. So when we focus on the outcome, we just can really stress ourselves out, even if it's in sales. You know, I got a $1 million quota that I have to hit. Well, you know, how do you do that? You got to make phone calls. You got to make contacts. You got to make outbounds. Right. So what's the process for success?
I think that's super insightful. And I don't know why, but for some reason, when you were explaining that, the way you were explaining it kind of opened up, you know, a whole new way of thinking. Because I was trying to figure out, asking myself this question: how do we figure out what we can control? Because in my mind, I was thinking of putting myself in the position of that baseball player, thinking, well, I'm the one who has to hit the double, so technically I do control that, but that's not true. And I realized, I think it was because how you explained it when you said the defense also plays a part. Instead of focusing on just anything, we focus on things we can control, and you can tell that that's something you can control by how many factors are in that situation. So when he hits the double, there's the factor of him, everything he's doing. So all those factors plus all the factors of all the defense. But then when you switch it and you say, I'm going to have a quality at bat, there's significantly less factors, and most of them are controlled by him. And I'd never thought about it that way. So I have to say thank you for explaining it that way. But to me, that's just so insightful that instead of, you know, thinking about factors that other people can control, you limit them. And usually when you do that, you only think of like one or two factors, and those you usually control. Like, did I work out today? Yes or no? Check,
Right.
So,
Right. So, as we went into this coronavirus shutdown on Friday, March 14th, I was in a training session with Brendan Bouchard. And I would say on that particular day going into that session, I was like a little bit rattled. Like I don't get rattled. I was beginning to get rattled. I got a high school senior, a bunch of things were shutting down, et cetera. And, his words were, look, choose your attitude, be a role model, right? And what's the process I need to do, my family needs to do, each of us needs to do to manage this time period to the best of our ability? What's the process, right? And so my theory is it's really got to take care of mind, body, spirit. I lead with the body, work out, eat good food, make sure you're drinking water, because if you take care of your body, it fuels your mind, right? You're in a better mood. And then for spirit, what are you doing in this socially distant kind of world to stay connected with your community?
yeah.
Right. So it's right. So that concept of, what's the process for success? You can use that in sport, in business, and in life.
Mm-hmm. I think, and even maybe one reason that people don't apply this outside of sports or business is because in sports or business, there's almost an external definition of success that you can just rely on. You don't have to create one yourself. You can just say, success means we have a good quarter. Success means we win this game. And in life, we don't necessarily define success. So I guess, and maybe you can, answer this question, but how have you helped your clients redefine success so that way they were able to create processes like the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, so for my one client who was not successful in getting promotions, over the course of close to a year, he worked to increase his brand within his company. So like, what do you mean by what's your brand? If somebody were to say, tell me about Justin, how would they describe you? That's your brand, right? And so the exercise is, what is your brand? What should it be? Who knows your brand? Who should know it? So many people will work in a job for, let's go, 5 to 10 years. And then they'll go, I would really like job X. X is in another part of my company. And I'll just go, who do you know in that department? They'll go, nobody. So you've been here for 10 years and nobody over there knows you, right?
Yeah.
That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity, right? So your brand is really, how do people describe you? So for this individual, his brand was tightly woven to his business unit. Like that business unit always traveled together. And I'm like, you need to go and form relationships in the home office. So he was in a branch, and like, you need to go to home office maybe 4 times a year and meet people that you deal with over the phone in person and form relationships so they get to know Justin as an individual, right? So that was part of the process. The second part of that is, how do we communicate? So often we communicate tasks. I run a podcast. I coach athletes, and we communicate the task versus the impact. The impact, I transform people's confidence. I transform people's careers, right? Impact versus task. So we worked on how do we strengthen his communication so that he truly conveyed what he was, how he was impacting. We did a revamp of his resume and coached. We coached that whole like role play. So when you go to home office, somebody might just interview you. You're like, what? Look, every time you're meeting people, people are assessing. I like Justin. I don't know if I like Justin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you just do a better job of making a good first impression?
Yeah. Well, uh, in I believe that the word sin comes from an old Greek word that means to miss the mark, miss the target in archery. And from what it sounds like, a lot of your job is really helping your clients stop sinning, really take their eyes off that really long distance target that's obscured by fog, clouds, and whatnot, and focus on the targets that are a lot closer and a lot more realistic to hit. Because, in getting the promotion, that's still the target, but instead you switched his success, his definition of success, to communicate better, to make relationships. And to me, that is so fascinating. Work on your brand. You
Yep.
shifted that goal of success.
Yes. So you know what? Hiring managers typically, select people they feel comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
they have a relationship with, that they know. Right or wrong, that's typically what happens, right? And so, how can you strengthen your brand and grow your relationships? And this is not just a young person's responsibility. It's everybody who is in the middle of a career, and they can be young, middle, or advanced. In a heartbeat, you could get a new boss. You get a new boss, you have a zero brand, right?
Yeah.
So every time there's transition, there's a need for you to kind of go, hey, I think I have to make sure I build a relationship. I need to make sure I'm communicating my impact. I need to make sure they understand the value I'm bringing to the table. Many people go, my boss should know. My boss should know. I
Right.
work hard. They should just know. Look, generally your boss has so much going on.
Yeah.
And I say this respectfully, they don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So how can you help your boss know how
Mm-hmm.
you're contributing?
And
So I love coaching that. I helped had one client who just happened to, we connected at the right time. She was in transition, got a job offer, and I'm like, ask for a sign-on bonus, ask for more vacation, and then we did it in writing, and she got it.
wow.
And her sign-on bonus was bigger than what her bonus was the year before.
That's awesome.
And she said to me, and she's not originally, she's born outside the U.S., and she says to me, I feel like there are rules I don't know. I'm like, girlfriend, there are rules that you don't know.
No.
And I'm not saying I know them all, but I got a lot closer to, where they were written. I didn't write them,
Mm-hmm.
but where they were written, and had a peek on how do you play them, and how do you understand them. And you can still be authentic, but you're like, oh, if the male asks for a rate, asks for more money, and the female doesn't, the male will get it and the female doesn't. So ask.
Yeah.
Right? There are these unspoken rules that if you get access to a coach who can help you, you can grow your opportunities.
Yeah. I was going to say earlier, when you were talking about, you have to communicate to your boss your value to them. It's funny because usually when you do that, it's by not only, being around them, talking with them, but doing things that take things off their plate. You actually make their life easier. And that's one of the reasons why they don't know your value. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. So I thought that was just kind of funny.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask another question dealing with sports, but also just kind of in life. What are some tactics that you use to help your clients generate confidence and move past self-doubt?
Yeah. So great question. Listen, I think one is we have to be transparent with how we talk to ourselves. right? So if every day we're saying, you stink, you're not a good mom, you didn't get this done, you're fat, whatever, we gotta just stop and just be transparent. And our words helping us or hurting us, right? It's kind of like this monkey voice that's just like, nee, 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 nee. And I'm like, oh my goodness, can we shut that down? Can we shut that down? We remember our mistake. Right now there's a lot of moms who are ready to pull out the hair. And I'm like, can you give yourself credit that you've survived 8 weeks of quarantine, 8 weeks of homeschooling online, 8 weeks if you're trying to also work, and 8 weeks of feeding your kids 3 meals a day, right? Like that, you've been a superhero. Has it been perfect? No, and nobody says it has to be. So I think, one, we have to learn to be kinder to ourselves. Two, confidence comes from keeping promises to ourselves, right? And, can you be it as simple as, I'm going to move my body 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, and don't judge it. Was it I put the music on and I danced around? I think you have to, part of confidence is you have to take physical care of yourself, right? Because again, if I move, I get my endorphins, I feel good.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things I do with my athletes that I've been encouraged to try and do with my business clients is, for my athletes, we do a confidence resume. Right. So Justin, did you ever play a sport?
I did. I played a couple, actually. I played soccer and football. Soccer more recreationally, but football in high school, yeah.
Yeah. So what I would do with an athlete is, right now, if we were to say, why should you feel better about yourself as an athlete, as a football player today versus a year ago? What have you done to grow your skills? And most of my clients are like, lifting, I'm running, my game IQ is better. Like, what can we come up with at least 10 reasons why right now you are a better athlete today than you were a year ago? So if we took that concept to anybody, 10 reasons why you're a better podcaster today than you were a year ago, right? 10 reasons why you're better at your craft for your full-time job today versus a year ago. Can we make that list? And literally for my athletes, we record it and it's on their iPhone. And I want them to listen to it every day, right? So can we just remind ourselves of, is my business where I want it to be? No, but it's this, which is better than where it was, it's still alive. It hasn't died with Corona, right?
Yeah.
Right? So and then I was at an event last week, and the name of the person who had the idea is escaping me, but his other concept on how to grow confidence is do one more. And it was really interesting. So if you're, you're going to work out for 30 minutes, do one more minute. If you're going to do 10 push-ups, do one more push-up. If you're going to, eat a salad, throw one more, vegetable on your plate, and those little wins of consistently doing one more will fuel your confidence.
Yeah.
So I think you got to listen to how you're talking to yourself. You got to, if you're beating yourself up, you got to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get small wins. You got to remember what you have done well. And then this concept of one more, I think, are pretty positive steps.
Wow. That is awesome. I think of the confidence resume, and I just try and imagine how would we all be different, because every new year, most of us try and do some sort of New Year's resolution and change our lives. And how would we be different if we also, in addition to that, looked back and said, okay, well, this last year compared to now, I now compared to then, I improved this much, and so on and so forth. So I think that's very insightful. So, and we're coming down to the end. So I want to ask you the last couple questions before we let you go. So based on our conversation today, what 1 to 3 action items would you give our audience to do today or this week to improve their lives?
Yeah, so if I were to say the number one thing I would say is really invest in your self-care and think about that from mind, body, spirit. And this rises up to the top of the list for me. In part, my brother, who was 10 years older than me, passed away from a heart attack at the age of 44. And when he passed over 20 years ago, it just said to me, we have to take care of ourselves to be available for others. And I make it really simple. I call it the 4 M's, and it's movement, meals, eat healthy meals, music, meditation, like those 4 things for your body. And then I put S, put some structure, right? And that structure gives you consistency, and make sure you have that social connection. So 4M squared. It's to take care of yourself. And if you struggle with self-confidence or you struggle with self-doubt, be purposeful to seek out podcasts, right? So Justin's podcast, I'm a junkie for a bunch of them, and I can rattle off some, but really I would say look for positive podcasts. A lot of people love Rachel Hollis. People love Brendan Bouchard. There's so much out there, and we have one life. We have one life, and we weren't put here to be miserable, right? So how can you drive the bus and really find joy in your life? And if you can't do it by yourself, find those resources that can help you make some shifts to have greater joy in your life.
Excellent. And then, Anne, how can our audience reach out to you, support you, and see what you're up to?
Yeah, so folks can find me on my website, which is Great Sports Minds, LLC. And I am working on new product all the time. And folks can also, if you go there, you'll see all my contact information. Be able to email me or call me. And you can always book a session directly for free right from my website.
Awesome. So audience, if you are interested in any of the topics we discussed today, or you feel you need a little bit extra push, go ahead and get a free session and talk with Anne one-on-one. Have her dig into your life and see where she can help you out. But thank you so much, Anne, for being on the show. I enjoyed it so much. I think sports psychology is fascinating, especially because if you look at most of the things we do in life, it's not that different than sports psychology, because we're still performing in every aspect, whether we're, going in for a job interview, trying to ask that young woman on a date, or just trying to have a good attitude in the day. So thanks for being on the show.
So Justin, my honor. I really enjoyed it, and excited to see what's ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for listening to that wonderful episode. And again, thanks, Anne, for being on the show. If you're listening to this, I really appreciate you being on the show and having that fun conversation with me. I really hope you took the action items that she gave us to heart. Those action items are very important, because the goal of the podcast is to help you do hard things, right? And so it's worth nothing if you just listen to the podcast and don't do anything. So go take action on those action items, actually start changing your life. You will see a difference, I promise you. Now, if you want to support the podcast, there are a few things you can do. First thing, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that notification bell so you are notified whenever episodes come out. As well, make sure you just listen to the episodes, not just subscribe. That's the way you're going to get this knowledge, this information, these insights into your mind, so that way you can start putting it into your life. Next thing, go and join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/The Hard Thing Podcast. There, you can band with like-minded individuals like you trying to do hard things, as well as give challenges to myself and my co-host, Ty Crockett, for our Thursday episodes. Every Thursday, Ty and I sit down, we talk about the action items we just talked about, and then we give each other challenges. We give each other a choice of 3 challenges, and if you want to submit a challenge for us to consider giving to one another, you can do so on the Facebook group. Again, facebook.com/groups/The Hard Thing Podcast. Also, And this one's actually kind of a freebie for you. You can actually go get a free audiobook. That's right, you can get a free audiobook from Audible, as well as start a free 30-day trial. Just go to audibletrial.com/thehardthingpodcast. And there, again, you get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial. I love Audible. I love listening to audiobooks. It's been a godsend during these COVID-19 pandemic days. So go get that. And the next thing you can do to support us is actually support Operation Underground Railroad. They're a nonprofit organization that goes undercover to rescue kids from sex trafficking. We're not affiliated with them. We just really love what they do because they go undercover rescuing kids. I mean, imagine being 5, 6, 7 and being in a place that you know no one, but being made to perform heinous acts. And you're barely, 5 years into this world. You don't know what's what, You're younger than most TV shows. Most TV shows have more seasons than you have years of life. That's kind of a scary thought. So if you want to help us, help them, go to GoFundMe.com/overcoming-average. Help us raise $1,000 for Operation Underground Railroad so they can go on more missions, put more bad guys behind bars, and rescue more kids. But if nothing else, just go to OURrescue.org and just learn about what they're all about. Get to know their message and spread it. That's how we're going to save these kids. That's how we're going to spread more light in this world, because God knows we need more light. The last thing you can do to support the podcast is a big one. Go out and do some hard things. Because by doing hard things, I promise you, guys, you will overcome.